I'm in the library's teen room, which is
Oh.
why you're seeing like the zombie picture and the mural and everything behind me. You're wondering why there's like comic book pictures. It's actually not mine. It's the teen room.
Ryan, for some reason, you look much better tonight.
Well, I'm using one of the newer computers that Jason helped the library get. So
I was talking about what's on your face.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks very much for joining. Call the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. Let's first review the minutes. Once again, Larry, thanks for putting those together. And let me pull those up here. Okay, this was on the 28th of December, our last meeting. We discussed the 5-year strategic plan as well as use of ARPA. Quite a bit of discussion about ARPA. Town resident survey and schedule the next meeting. I think we adjourned early even.
Yeah, December was a short meeting.
Any motions to amend, to correct, amend?
I think this would be for this month's meetings as opposed to changing last month's meetings. But I did hear back on the electronic voting, and we are not allowed to do that by law. So that was confirmed by the gentleman that Mr. Stivers pointed me to last meeting. So I don't know if you just want to note that in this month, but that does need to be removed from the list of ARPA projects.
Okay, yeah, that will be for this month's meeting.
No changes.
Okay. I move to accept the meeting minutes as is.
Second.
Second, okay. Go around the room. Larry?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
And likewise, aye. Thank you. Thanks again. All right, let's jump in. We're going to shift to the beginning of the meeting. The review of the MIS tech budget. Angela and I have been invited to join advisory tomorrow, where we'll be reviewing the MIS budget for fiscal year 23. And we have Jason on the line to answer any questions about it. So let me share my screen. Let's see here. And so I also heard that this is almost a consolidation. There was some consolidation work, and maybe Jason, you can comment on this, where various departments were having their own expenditures for various software services, technology, and then that's been consolidated into the MIS budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So if you look, I think if you scroll down to the bottom there. Yeah, so those three departments right there, if I'm breaking up or anything, please let me know. But the police, library, and fire are now consolidating their line items for purchasing any type of equipment that pertains to IT under the IT budget. It was discussed internally, but also kind of directed by the selectmen to kind of do that as well. So we now have those three items in there as well, which obviously adds an additional, it's like close to 9,000, if not a little bit more, to my budget.
So could you just re-explain what is being consolidated for those three departments?
So anytime that they are purchasing a new laptop or desktop, or typically it's been laptops, now it's their money. That money is now coming out of my budget to purchase them their laptops, and so that I can keep track of all the inventory that's being purchased for the town.
But they still make the decisions on what they need to purchase.
Correct. And they would go through me and discuss that with me as far as like specs, if they need something specifically. But yeah, the plan is for them to still, you know, direct as far as what they want, but then also ask for my direction as far as what they should get.
That's great. So, because I assume that there's benefits of commonality for the specs of their hardware, et cetera. It's like for pooling of spares and all that stuff, right? So
Yeah,
it
exactly.
makes
So,
complete sense to use you. Right?
yeah.
Jason, does this imply that they always had specific line items in their budget for their IT?
Yes, and I think that's the same for you too, Ryan. Right? Correct. You had an actual line item for computer devices, right?
Yep, that's correct. That's what the amount was. And that was, Jason and I had a conversation about this. I guess to clarify, not every single IT item is moving over. Like, for instance, there's a self-checkout machine that we have a service contract for. Jason and I looked at that contract, because it's an esoteric library item that we supported with state aid money, we decided to maintain getting that and having that within the library's budget. But if it comes to replacing, exactly like what Jason said, a desktop or a laptop, it makes way more sense to have that come out of Jason's budget. And so it's a little different with police and fire. The selectmen can, I guess, direct departments to do a certain thing. I have to make sure that my elected board agrees. And we discuss this in library trustee meetings and they agree to it. And we want to, continue the partnership and work with Jason moving forward.
Thank you, Ryan.
Ryan, does this mean that you still may be getting grants and such on your own, right? For other things? For things that would not come through Jason's budget? You just mentioned one. Yeah,
relating to technology. We will continue to get grants. I would say if there's a technology component, I would loop Jason in prior to submitting a grant request if there were technology outcomes. I guess you could make an argument for the library. There's always technology outcomes, right? Because if we're circulating it, we're going to have to barcode it. But if there's a specific computer component, I would talk to Jason, I think, as part of my process before applying.
But this consolidation won't affect your ability to get those grants, will it?
No, it will not.
Okay. So in some respects, you're still going to have sources of money outside of Jason, more or less.
I would say the majority of grants that the library applies for aren't relating specifically to technology, hardware, or even software. They're more programming-based grants that are for specific initiatives. The last big grant that the library got was for garden spaces outside. So that had a lot less to do with technology, I would say, than.
Okay, thank you.
Is this all replacement equipment, or is it also for some net new equipment?
It's mostly especially for police and fire, it's mostly replacement. And in case, there could be an in-case emergency type thing, but it's mostly for replacement.
Okay. The workstations that you're getting, are you targeting purely laptops moving forward, or are you also doing it? Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Nice. Does this network equipment, that seems like a fairly, I don't know, fairly low number for network equipment? But maybe we don't have much need. But does this cover everything you need in terms of making sure we have connectivity? With now that we're joining network, having the town fiber go across town. Yeah. Or does this number need to be higher?
If I'm not mistaken, that number is kind of more focused towards any switches that need to be replaced, but also another firewall for replacing some of the firewall for the DPW, and possibly as well for the the one that's located in public safety. And I'm still trying to figure out end of life on that one as well, and just making sure I have, I want to have them both in the same place when I install them, and have the ISPs up and running.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of a separate note, and I know you're just sort of still recovering, Jason, but I'd love to find a time when you have some time to sit down and discuss and put together a plan for the redundancy network. I've been giving it some more thought. This is something I've set up years and years ago, just with some even open source software to handle the active failover between two commoditized network connections. I think we could do it here. I'd be happy to work with you on that, but we can do that outside the meeting and another time.
Yep. Yeah. That's my plan, is to do something like that. And yeah, I've done that as well in the past, and definitely look for your input. Would definitely appreciate some input as well.
Great.
Dave, can you help us understand the difference between 22 and 23? I mean, I kind of went line by line, and it looks like most of it's very similar to what was in 22. The budget management software is not in 23, and I think that was a conscious decision. Didn't they drop that piece of software?
Correct. They did drop that. And some of the line items that you'll maybe either noticed or don't notice is under software. So what I did is I kind of separated out contracted services and software, similar contracted services. But also you'll see under software that there's Duo, two-factor authentication, and there's Fiscal Umbrella.
Yeah.
Those are two new applications that have been purchased during my time here. And the print solution design photos, which is Canva, it's a small amount, but it's, again, another new item that's on there as well. And as far as pricing for like the copier maintenance, the new printer that was purchased for the Board of Health is on my budget as well. So it kind of added some of the price difference there as well. And yeah, and you can see that there where it says, new and FY22 is some of the things that were added as far as pricing. And the price for program and security miscellaneous was $50K at one point last year, and it's now $25K, which is going to be something I'll focus on doing, like some pen testing for the network as well. So I wanted to add some money in there to kind of do some type of security scans or pen testing as well with the network.
And then if we get any ARPA money, that would be on top of what's represented here. Do we need a line item for the Youth and Family Services SaaS software that we've been talking with that group about? I know we don't have a solution picked yet.
Yeah, and I think it's something that will affect the Youth and Family Services budget and not mine. But again, I'm not 100% sure on that yet. And again, this is also a draft. So if something changes between now and then, I'll let you guys know.
Okay, great.
This Duo, is Duo licenses, that cover licenses for all town employees and board members? Or
for anybody who is accessing a laptop/desktop that is logging into our system, yes, they have a license for each person.
Okay, but not necessarily the email accounts like board members, etc.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
No, that would be way too many.
Okay, that's great. That's wonderful that we're moving towards Duo for rollout.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Just so you know as well, I did add double the price for under the ISP. I doubled the price for the ISP, just again a guesstimate on what the pricing is going to be. But once I find the right ISP to put in place, that number could move up or down depending on what we get.
It could be for a secondary, high speed, reliable internet connection, right? Great, wonderful.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just one question would be, when it comes to, having line items voted on and such, are the individual departments going to stand up and, make their own cases? Or are you going to be the guy who has to speak for everything?
As far as my budget goes?
Well, as far as this combined budget, yes.
Yeah,
You've-
everything on here, yeah, it would be me that would be questioned on it. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any, besides, I'm going to have Carla and Brian there with me because we kind of work together on tweaking some things with the software line item, and there's some accounting terminology that I may not be 100% on, obviously, that they're going to help me assist me with tomorrow. But besides that, it's all going to come through me.
How does the bottom line compare year over year?
Well, again, not an accountant per se, but I'll tell you right now that this budget line item has increased by, if you look at the first tab, it shows you by 7%, but that's also including 7.32, but that's also including the police, fire, and library additions that have been added on there. And that's also including the payroll being at the midpoint for the pay level for the second employee.
If I might, just for one sec, I think that the previous years weren't always an accurate picture because, like, for instance, some of the technology amount of money was coming out of the library's budget directly, right? So I think one could argue that this is the first year, right, where this is somewhat of a complete IT budget. So I might just caution you to look at the year-to-year increase.
Yeah,
with
yeah, we should
scrutiny,
avoid. Yeah.
only because of that. And then also this is, Jason was at town meeting last year, but he didn't get as much of a hand in the budget process as he did this year. So you could also make an argument that this is the first budget Jason's really got to work on. So I would just say those two things for you to keep in mind.
Yeah. And we're also here to help support, right? So the first questions will be to Jason, and if there's any additional lines of questions, so forth, I am very happy to stand up and say we've reviewed, and it's not just Jason saying that, it's a whole committee, and so it's we're here to support. That's why we review these things. So, I mean, to me, it looks very good. Thank you for all your work on this, Jason.
Oh,
Jay,
thank
can
you.
I ask you one more question? On the copier maintenance, it looks like it went from 8,000 this year to 12,000 for FY23. Am I reading that correct? Is that just because we have more copiers?
A lot of it had to do with that Board of Health one that we added to the line item as well. So that definitely took an increase there.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Looks good.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the budget? If not, yeah, thank you, Jason, for all your work on this. Looks great. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, as mentioned, I'll reach out to you offline. We'll find some time to discuss the internet connections. I think that is everything that we need you for. Hi, Jason. Because you were streaming to YouTube from your computer. So is that going to be a problem if you?
No, it shouldn't be. But I'll make you host anyway. And
Okay.
you'll have all those anyway. And it shouldn't go away. It should stay going live.
Okay. Awesome.
I'll stick around for a little bit longer. I just don't know how long I can keep my eyes open. That's all.
Okay. Good. Okay, let's move on to just a review of how it went with the selectmen on the survey and strategic plan. Angela, do you want to cover that?
Sure. So gosh, it's been a week or so ago now, right? We were with the Board of Selectmen on January 4th. And the data scientist, Marianne and Brian, who had compiled the survey results, did a summary for the select board to share with them the results of the town survey. I think the general themes that we heard back were a lot of support for actually just having the data. I think there was a recognition that it was kind of the first time that we had done this type of survey, and just, even having a starting point or a baseline to work from was a positive thing. There was a lot of appreciation for the MTC and for the efforts on behalf of the committee in putting together the survey and collecting the results. There didn't appear to be a lot of surprised reactions from what the results actually were. But there was one committee member who I think was looking for maybe some more specific recommendations, like they wanted it to be very explicit what types of steps they needed to take as a result of the survey. So I think it was well received, and I think it gave us, a lot of good input and a lot of good things to think about in terms of next year's survey. Anything that you'd add to that, Matt?
Yeah, completely agreed with what you just said. To add a little more color, one of the key themes from the survey that was conned out through both sentiment as well as specific responses was Southborough citizens want more transparency. So what does that mean?
Right.
So I think that's the digital theme of the select board is like, okay, what do they mean? What do they want more transparency? Like we follow open meeting law, et cetera. So they wanted to drill into the specific statements from people. Like what are people's specific, what is actionable here? You can't just simply say, I want more transparency. That's not actionable. So since that meeting, we've shared with them the raw results. And that's actually one of the still action items I need to do is take the raw results on a per department basis, because as if you recall, the survey was divided by sections per department, and each department there was an open-ended, free response section, and I hadn't, forwarded that on to the respective departments, but I'm going to do so. So each department, if they're interested, they can drill through all of the comments that were given for the previous survey. Yeah.
And one thing I think we tried to do, and I'm not sure how well it landed, was, we were trying to show them the survey results and then make the connection, at least for the technical items on, and as a result of this input, here are the, 4 or 5 big IT projects that we believe should be funded by ARPA that will actually speak to this feedback that we've received. But it didn't seem like maybe that connection was as clear as it needed to be for that. So hopefully we'll have another connection or another opportunity to make that connection with the ARPA committee once we understand what their process and stuff will be.
Yeah. As for sort of next steps on the survey, I'm started to dust off. I've made a copy of the previous years, made a copy for 2022, and started adjusting it based on the input we've received on how to improve it. One of the things that we need to do, and this is sort of FYI, Jason, I'm going to need to approach Mark and see if we can get some temporary, I think this year we only have like 500 or 1,000 in our budget. We don't have enough budget in the MTC to be able to upgrade our SurveyMonkey account to the higher level, which gives us basically more dynamic surveys. So we can allow people to skip certain sections. And that was one of the big pieces of feedback that we received, is it's too long, you can't skip it. So the level of engagement started high, and then it started dropping, and it just went much lower. So I did include it in the MTC's FY23 ask, but I'm wondering if we can accelerate upgrading that. So I'll carbon copy you when I approach Mark on that ask, because I'd love to use that for this year when we do our next survey. I think it'd also benefit the fire department, and the fire department's using the same SurveyMonkey account. So. And
I will keep an eye on the YouTube, but I'm actually going to sign off, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Feel
Thanks a
better.
lot, Jason. Yeah. Take care.
Have a good night.
Yeah. The other recommendation from the selectmen was that we work with the capital committee. If you recall, last year was the first year I just sort of copy and pasted questions from various different departments that they want to get supplemental questions that they wanted to contribute. And the only department that's contributed supplemental questions regarding major capital projects was Public Works. The it was a strong recommendation from the select board that we work with the capital planning committee and devise, so we don't have just a single department set of capital questions and prioritization, but it should be, what are all the major capital projects that we're considering across town, across all departments, and allow citizens to sort of prioritize. So I've engaged the chair of the capital planning committee, who's very interested in working with us on that. And I've also volunteered to help him even do some much more near term. So I say that, as part of this next survey, the time horizon for the surveys is going to be 1 to 5 years time horizon. It's going to be it's part of our once a year survey, etc. He has an interest in the capital planning committee. It's not just him, but has an interest in doing a survey, possibly doing a survey in a much more shorter horizon, like within the next month or two, because there are some upcoming projects that capital is involved with that we need to learn town resident sentiment on. For example, the upcoming proposal about school buildings, and like what might happen with Woodward School versus other schools, etc. So apparently they're receiving some proposal from some consultants, and it's because it has implications on physical buildings. It's pretty important that we get a survey out quickly. So all this to say is I'll personally be helping him stand up a survey just for that effort, in parallel with having working with somebody in his committee for our annual town Southborough satisfaction survey.
Matt, you think that the survey results would actually feed into a decision on which school to, change out of being a school?
I don't know enough about the issues that are involved. I can't comment on that. From my understanding, he's received some professional or some consultants' opinion on what should be done, and I think he basically wants to gauge voter sentiment on some issue. So, but I can't comment on the details.
When you said he, who is that?
The chair of the capital committee.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Jason Malinowski.
Yeah, Jason, that's right. Yeah.
All right.
So there's a public meeting that the capital committee is going to be doing Thursday night. So it's in 2 days. And I know this partially because the library board is participating in it, but so is the advisory committee, and I think youth and family as well. And the proposal, William, is going to be outlaid, I believe, at that meeting. So there'll be a lot more information about, I think, what the proposal is after Thursday evening. So it's coming this week.
Okay, great.
Okay, any other questions on the next fiscal next survey that we're planning to do? So in general, the summary of what we're planning to do for this survey is we're trying to make it easier to use, reduce the number of questions, simplify it, and I'm hoping to do that via the upgraded, more dynamic SurveyMonkey account, as well as trim some of the questions we had on it.
What's your thinking on timing, Matt?
I'm hoping to work with the various departments. I'm hoping we don't make any major changes to the questions from the different departments, because the core set of questions did come from the survey instrument that we use from, that's been used from other cities. And I think that they're good questions. And I do like the idea of measuring sentiment over year over year and see how it changes. But if we can make it so it's dynamic, so people can skip questions of departments they had less in it, I think it'll increase engagement. So all this is to say, I don't think there's that much work to do before or that many changes that need to occur apart from upgrading the account and making it more dynamic. So I'm hoping that we can release it by end of February, early March. But I'm fully open to suggestions or
When
recommendations.
did we run the last one? I'm trying to remember when we actually launched it.
I think it was March, and
Was it
then
March?
yeah,
It was after all town meeting, wasn't it?
I think it was
Yeah, I believe so, because we had the URL on the little booklet that we
Yeah.
gave out at town meeting.
Yeah.
Wow, has it already been already? Okay.
Speaking of all town meeting, I know there were some rumblings for a while that it might be postponed. But considering the most recent news on Omicron, that it may be crashing, has anybody heard anything on that about whether or not it could be postponed or it would go off on time?
They did talk about it at the select board meeting, and there was no decision at that meeting. I mean, that's been a couple weeks ago, but they were looking at different options at that time.
So they still have have we already gone past the deadline for warrant articles, or are we still in that area when you can have warrant articles?
So yes, you're past the deadline, I
Okay,
believe. And then also March 26th, I believe, is the current projected town meeting date, which is the last Saturday in March. I know that the selectmen are meeting concurrently right now, and I think they just had a discussion about the noise bylaw. So I don't think a decision to postpone has been finalized yet. I think March 26th is still the working date of town meeting at the moment. But I could be wrong, because I can't listen to you guys and listen to them at the same time.
you've got 2 ears,
Ryan. Come
that's
on.
right.
Did you hear, Ryan, whether it's going outside or inside?
I don't know if you could have a late March town meeting. I think it's going to be weather dependent. So it might be, if you recall, they sometimes like pick a date, and then, like, let's say it rains. I mean, we had a rainy town meeting, I think, last year, right? Didn't they? They had to get a bunch of tents for the special one. So, I'll say Mr. Hegarty is very inventive at when he has to prepare for the weather. So I think the plan right now is probably to have it outside, because I don't think we've had an indoor one since COVID. So I would probably guess on being outside at the moment.
Okay,
Okay, let's move on. ARPA fund usage. I know we discussed this last meeting, and we agreed that we should continue to brainstorm. And I know that, thank you for all your work, Angela, on the strategic tech plan, because that includes some recommendations for potential ARPA project uses. And I know that, Angela, you're still trying to track down the process for submitting or nominating projects for using funds. But with that being said, have we had any additional ideas come up of recommendations for technology-related projects for usage of ARPA funds?
If you look at the meeting minutes, there's the list of projects. We would have to remove the electronic voting one, given Mr. Hegarty's comments about our capability to do that. So that one would come off the list. And then we said we would add security projects and cloud migration were the other 2 concepts that had come up. I did reach out to the ARPA committee to ask about process and level of detail and stuff. I didn't hear back, but it was over the holidays. So I sent a follow-up just to see if I could get some more information. But it's also possible, I guess, that they haven't defined that yet. So maybe that's why we haven't heard back. So I'll give them a little bit more time and then try to see if I can follow up again.
That's great. Okay, does anybody else have, Larry or Will, do you have additional ideas that have come up since our last meeting on tech usage of our ARPA funds?
Nothing new, no.
no, nothing new. Just one quick question. Was I hallucinating? Didn't we have a indoor all-town meeting last fall, special meeting?
That was, but it was pushed to the max. You're right. You're right.
That's
But
when
it
we
was
had the
like
2 gyms.
So I wasn't hallucinating?
we were
Damn,
not.
I'm gonna have to take
was
more
the-
drugs, I guess.
That was the one I didn't have to go to, William. So I didn't even know if it was inside or outside. So you should just not be talking. That's really
I could be hallucinating the whole thing. You never know.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So, but I think the window's still open. You know, if we do think of things, I assume that Ryan has the library. How's the library dealt with the ARPA issue? Like, has the library has the board put in for various library projects? Are there any technology related ones?
So Mr. Stivers reached out to us, I think even prior to the formation of the ARPA committee, and we did have a discussion at a trustees meeting about this. To be honest, we funded a lot of our special projects over the years, including the new roof, which was sort of a big initiative. One of the things that sort of, I guess, not really directly for Southborough, but the library is participating in a statewide program for hotspot lending, which is, that was something the MBLC offered to all libraries. And the program is actually set to expire in October. So just, I guess, as an advance to your meeting tomorrow night with advisory, this is something they're going to bring up to you guys. And we never made you aware of it because we signed up for the program. We got the hotspots and then we started circulating them. We didn't have to pay for anything. And Jason was aware we were doing the program, but we were kind of seeing how it went as a pilot. For our budget next year, we budgeted for a continuation of the program. And if you watch the advisory meeting with the library last week, there's a lot of discussion from advisory members about this, including, I guess, some confusion as to why we're circulating hotspots in the first place. You know, we've done some research. I think there might be a misconception that everybody in Southborough has access to the internet. I think most people do, the majority of people do, but not everybody does. So we also serve sort of a wider regional community than just Southborough, because we have people from other surrounding townships who come in. So I don't even know what the applicable functions of the ARPA money are. I don't know enough about it, but I don't know if that is a possible, like the continuation of that MBLC program, if that's something we're interested in, is something that we could come to you guys about. I know the library trustees are set to discuss this next week. So
We have results of the pilot. Do you have any like data on usage and stuff like that?
I can get that. They want specific information on patrons, like to the level about what their socioeconomic status was. I mean, there are going to be limits on the type of data I can provide. I can tell you that. Like, I can give you kind of a ballpark of like how many times they've gone out. And then maybe we're looking at how many individual users there have been, right? So that is sort of the information I think I'm putting together. But we really just started the program in October of last year. So, and I think it was kind of late October. And then we started trying to market it because we kind of got them. And then we had to market after because it was a state sign-up program. So they've been used. I don't know if they've been used at the level people are going to be 100% happy with, but like we have several of them checked in now. I'll say that. So
do we know the typical archetypes of use cases for the hotspots? Like, why do people use them? Obviously, there's a certain case where some people they don't have internet at home. They need the internet at home.
This was, and you're being, I guess you're being more gentle than some of the advisory members were. Like, we don't qualify usage at the library. So one thing I say is when you check out a book, I don't sort of ask you why you're reading it. So I sort of look at a circulating item, I guess, the same way. So the hotspots, I don't know the usage. I know for one of the things patrons have shared with us when they've returned them is if they're taking a trip, right? And it's a T-Mobile hotspot. That's the service provider for the program. So as long as they're in a T-Mobile service area, they can use them like if they're traveling from one location to another. So they've been popular with like having internet in the car, but that's only from the patrons who've shared that with us. So I don't know that that's all patrons, and that's been the only use of them. But that's the one piece of, I guess, like raw data I can give you now without asking more about it.
Most mobile provider plans nowadays on your phones offer, I mean, you can turn
Phone into
on
a
your
hotspot.
hotspot, right? And you just basically convert your phone into a hotspot. So,
Hmm.
um,
If you pay for that level of service.
Yeah, if you pay for that.
is it not common for major providers and major plans to allow for hotspots on there?
It's common for AT&T not to give you anything you don't pay for. Um, Ryan, I have a question about my favorite hobby horse, and that is, what about live feeds to, for Meet the Candidate night and all that? I understand we're obstacles. Are there's obstacles, things that can be overcome with money?
I think that would be a great question for the Cable Advisory Committee. I know I checked with
You
them.
mean the capital advisory?
No, the Cable Advisory Committee was the group that was actively trying to pursue the live feed option,
Oh,
because it has to be, I think they were trying to negotiate that with the carriers for the fiber, like Verizon was who they were in active negotiations with. The last time I checked, it was with the chair, who's Barry Rubenstein. I still don't think it was something that the carriers could add.
is the Cable Advisory Committee a Southborough committee?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
That's the committee you're on, Will, isn't it? Like the cable.
Well, no. I'm on the Cable TV Committee. I'm not, but not on the Cable Advisory Committee. Are you?
Is there?
yeah,
Are
William, I'm talking about the same thing.
Oh, you
I
are.
don't know what
Okay.
the formal name of it is. I thought it was the Cable Advisory Committee.
No, I'm on the Cable TV Committee, which is why I asked the question. So I think
I-
I can tell you that so far I haven't heard of.
Sorry,
Yes,
it's the Cable Television Committee.
Right.
William's correct. Yeah, so
Right,
that
and-
committee.
Yes, and we negotiated that in the contracts, but my understanding was that there were technical issues that would, even though we had the equipment, would not allow for live feed broadcasts from the library of Meet the Candidate night. That the
So-
equipment that we had negotiated was part of the solution, but not all of it.
So would those not be live broadcasts on Zoom and YouTube?
Well, this is through Sam, right?
No, but we're going to get a lot more people through YouTube than Sam. More people have access to YouTube in town than Sam.
Okay, all right, then, well, okay, that's fine. I guess the question is, we have to try that out. We'd also have to make sure that we had a camera that could basically broadcast to Zoom. That could look over the entire room and zero in on people who are asking questions and things like that.
Yeah, agreed.
To answer your original question, William, I don't know. I assumed the Cable Television Committee was still talking to Verizon about the ability to do it. I know Verizon has updated some of their infrastructure, so that it might be that problem has been resolved. If it has, no one's notified me.
Okay,
So
I'll get in touch with Jason and then, but I haven't heard anything through the Cable TV Committee. Okay, thank you.
yeah, my sort of standing thing was to check with Barry every couple months and just see if there was any updates. But I know you've checked on that a number of times, and I wish I had more of an update for you. I haven't heard anything new from the last time I inquired, which
Okay.
was, I think, in the early fall of last year.
I was excited about the Cable Advisory Committee, but you've dashed my hopes. All right, thank you.
Okay.
There's too many committees. It's hard keeping track of what the names of them are, so I apologize.
Yeah. So yeah, but has there been any funds requested for cameras or Zoom equipment for the library?
Well, that would not be a cable TV.
Yeah, I know
issue.
it's not.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. That's a question for Ryan.
Right.
We probably wouldn't request cameras to store here, like that would be, I know that there's been a change in Sam because Terry, who was one of the employees, so was it Kathleen? Catherine? Kathleen has left and Terry is now in charge of Sam. So I just would say, like, if there were cameras purchased, we might want it to be through Sam because they have the facility at Trotter that they could store cameras. We really have no storage at the library.
No, I was thinking about like taking one of your rooms or some of your rooms and turning them into what are called Zoom rooms, which are basically video conference enabled rooms, so that you can have a committee meeting in the room and then broadcast. It's basically built, have a TV mounted on the wall and a camera that near that TV, that it's sort of built into the room. Has there been any discussions of that, basically enabling some of the library rooms to become more video conference enabled?
The one meeting room we've closed. We closed when COVID started, and we're doing an interior renovations project right now to paint, and then there's going to be an announcement next week about the library closing for a couple days to do some of the initial recarpeting work. So you guys are the first to hear it publicly here.
Yay!
So I know, right? Exclusive.
Breaking news. Everybody listen.
So we've had to use the meeting room both as a temporary staff lunchroom because of all the work upstairs, and also as a storage area for all of the construction. So what I can also preface this with is that there has been discussion long-term about utilizing what was the meeting room as potentially additional library space, because we're having increasingly to rely on that room in ways that we didn't before. So we don't know, pending the renovations, how things are gonna go. We don't really want to close the one meeting room we have, but I can tell you that it also is not really large enough to meet all the needs of our users. So that is something the trustees and I are looking at. And then hopefully when we get through COVID, we'll be able to, I will say we've asked questions about our meeting rooms and surveys, and it's not, we really were under the impression that people were reliant on meeting space at the library. And what we've determined from our survey data is that they're not. And honestly, people have had to make other accommodations for the past couple of years. And if you remember, a year prior to COVID, the library had to shut down because of the flood. So that was downstairs, and that also prevented meetings too. So unfortunately, I think most of the people who used our meeting space have moved on. So I would still love to provide meeting space at the library, but as far as Zoom room, Matt, I mean, I think that might be something we're looking at in a potentially new or renovated library space. Like that might be far down the road.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It is on our ARPA project list though, Matt. We do have implement interactive conference room capabilities as one of the potential ARPA projects. So we could then prioritize what public spaces we think they could best be leveraged in.
Great. So last note on this ARPA thing for the library. I assume, Ryan, you've sort of been thinking outside the box for if we had a significant amount of money that we wanted to apply for, including adding redundancy to either the generator systems or the pumps or whatever flooding mitigation system is in place. I've lost track of where we are on the flood mitigation system, as well as possibly expansion of the library building itself. I know that's sort of a crazy idea, but if we had millions of dollars, is that something that you've considered?
Yeah, no, the trustees and I had active discussions about the library. Really, you couldn't tell from the meeting room discussion a couple of minutes ago, the library is really at capacity, and largely to fit books into the library that we purchase, we have to take older books out. And that is not really feasible long-term for any library. We need to have a little bit of space to expand and grow. We also want to have sufficient programming space to meet the needs of our users, right? And one of the things we're asking for in the library's budget next year is programming funding. So we're going to have money to do programs. We won't necessarily to have the space to do every program we want, right? So we are looking, I think, long term at what the future space needs of the library are, and that'll be, I think, part of Thursday's discussion a little bit. It's part of the reason why the library's participating in that. So Matt, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah,
Matt.
it does. I'm thinking if ARPA is a sort of a once in a generation thing to get a lot of money poured into very specific projects, and if one of those could be, physical expansion of the library building, then I wonder if that's been considered.
And I think that the MBLC is looking at the state construction program, and if there's applicable funds from ARPA that can be directed towards that in order to facilitate. But there was a waiting list of library construction projects, so that might also be, we haven't even applied yet. So I'll say that. I will say we were interested, and we have had discussions with the facilities department on potentially getting a generator. We had one temporarily during the remediation. And I will say, if the library loses power, we have water alarms downstairs that are tied into the alarm system, as well as the sump pumps, which need electricity in order to function. So if the library loses power, potentially we haven't had any water issues, I'll say, since they did the Main Street work with the lower level. We redid the roof. We had some roof issues. If I'm not dealing with water at the library and the ground floor, I'm dealing with it from the roof, right? So,
even after the roof renovation, or
there was a little hiccup in one area, and they've corrected it. So that happened in September. September, you guys might not know this, is the most heavy rain month of the year. I have to know these things.
Interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of people think it's in the spring. It's actually September is when we get the most rainfall. But so since the flood remediation and the Main Street work, we haven't gotten any of the water issues we previously had in the lower level. So I don't know how necessary it is to have a generator permanently, but it is something I think for redundancy, like you said, Matt, that I would be interested in long-term if funding was available. So that might potentially get added as a wish list item if that's available to us. We would be interested.
I would think, before you go with generators, you might want to consider life rafts.
Yeah, floaties. I have some floaties in my office just in case. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see here. Action items tracking. Where are we with that discussion?
Yeah, I honestly, after I brought it up on the text message for the agenda, I actually never got to go back and look at the list. I haven't looked at it in months since we first created it. So what I'd like to do is push this off to the next meeting. I'll review it. I'll circulate it to a few people and get some feedback. And for the next meeting, I'll try to have an updated list that we can start walking through.
Sounds great.
If that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I probably have some updates for you, Larry. So if you can send me.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there's
version.
probably a lot of updates. But yes, I'll get a copy to you as soon as I get a chance to go through it and update the obvious things.
Okay. Sorry, apologies. Going back to the hotspot usage, I do think it does warrant learning more about the use cases for the hotspots and possibly doing a survey of the users. I don't know if you have the contact information, Ryan, of people who have checked out hotspots, surveying them with more details about what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, how did it fit their use case? Did it not fit their use case, etc. And that's the sort of information that would help justify, expansion or continuation to me of the program.
So we're gonna continue, the program for MBLC is through October of this year. So we're still in January. So I think kind of in advance of the trustees meeting, one of my pitches was going to be to have an optional survey for users where if they like this program and they want it to continue, to answer a few questions about usage. So
Yeah.
I would say, as long as, I don't want to sort of try to track the people down who have already checked it out,
That's fine.
for this
That's
sort
fine,
of this
yeah.
pilot thing. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about the hotspots now, and I don't think everybody even knew the library had them. Like if you've been inside the library, we have posters, we have advertisements that we got from the state in order to promote them. And I think there was like a My Southborough post when we first got them, but people, I don't think it's on everybody's radar, right? So I think if people know more, like we advertise a little bit, people start taking them out of more, like they're hot, that's kind of what we want with the hotspots. And then we can start asking people to sort of, I still think it should be optional, Matt. I think we should ask people to fill out the survey. And if they really like them enough and they wanted to keep going, they should be able to answer a couple questions for us in order to do that.
Completely agree. It should be an optional survey. I didn't think that, but the answer to those questions will be what's necessary to justify any sort of budget that's put before in town meeting. If the town is going to be fronting the budget, continuing to fund the budget for the items, then the voters will ask, how are these being used? Why can't people just use their cell phones? Or are we is the town now competing with what the mobile services, or I think the same type of question if say the library is going to open up a tool rental checkout. Well, why are you doing that when you can go rent tools at Home Depot? To me, it's a similar question. We need to basically we need data to be able to answer the questions that will come up at town meeting.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're working on some questions to ask users now, and we might even have that implemented as early as February for people to start answering questions.
Right, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a little different than providing tools that you could get at Home Depot, in that, especially for those residents who don't have ready access to the internet, a lot of the library's programs are internet based. A lot of the library's subscriptions now are internet based, and therefore one could make the argument that facilitating access to the internet is one way of promoting a lot of those programs. So I don't see it as being sort of out of the blue personally.
That's very true. I didn't think of that in that context. Though we have to think about internet access is something that clearly we would like to have be much more ubiquitous. Everybody should have access to it in town. Is the library the right venue to promote that, to make sure that everybody can get access to internet?
Well, see, already going into my sort of my advisory pitch a little bit, but like the hotspot program is really a continuation of what the library already does. We do provide wireless services to anybody who comes in, and you can, with a library card, go on a desktop computer and then log in and then use the internet. So I think, because a lot of people were asking in advisory why this program even exists to a certain extent. And I think part of that was, with libraries being closed because of COVID, there was very clearly something in a lot of communities that got lost, right? Is that people were not able to access the internet. Maybe that's not as prevalent in Southborough as it is in some communities that were harder hit. But I would just say, I don't think we're completely immune. And the idea of, we also were interested in doing this even prior to the program, because if we do outdoor programming, the library's wireless service does not extend to outside the property, right? So if a staff member checks out a hotspot and then we then go outside, we then have internet when we're on the property outside, which we didn't have the option previously. So I would just say there's not just, obviously the public outcomes are what I was most interested in so that we could circulate them and people could have internet, but also there's some staff applications and some programming applications as well. So.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah. Okay. All right, any other comments on that topic? Okay. I think we've gone through our agenda. Is there anything that I've missed for tonight? If not, I move that, well, let's look at our calendar for a February meeting before we adjourn. If we keep the theme of, like, say, the third Tuesday, what does the 15th look like?
Is fine.
That looks okay for me.
Looks okay.
Okay. 15th from 7 to 9. I will go ahead and book it. All right. I move that we adjourn.
I second it.
Great. Go around the room. Will?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
And likewise, aye. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and thank you, Ryan, for joining us. It was wonderful to have you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.